Hello, viewers. My name is Oscar,
And I'm Reese.
and together we will discuss the history, current state.
Issues and the future of adventure and action adventure games.
To start, Reese, what exactly is the genre adventure and action adventure games?
Well, Azuka, an adventure game is a video game in which the player assumes the role of a protagonist in an interactive story driven by exploration and puzzle solving. The genre's focus on story allows it to draw heavily from other narrative-based media, literature, and film, encompassing a wide variety of literary genres. Many adventure games, text and graphic, are designed for a single player since this emphasis on story and character makes multiplayer design difficult.
Right. While an action adventure game is a hybrid video game genre that can be defined as a game with a mixed elements from an action and adventure game. They are faster paced than pure adventure games because they include both physical and conceptual challenges. Action adventure games normally include a combination of complex story elements. The story is heavily reliant upon the player's character's movement, which triggers story events and thus affects the flow of the game.
And finally, to add to our genre definitions, a pure action game is a video game genre that emphasizes physical challenges, including hand-eye coordination and reaction time. The genre includes a large variety of subgenres such as fighting games, beat-em-up shooter games, and platform games. Multiplayer online battle arena and some real-time strategy games are also considered action games.
From each genre's definition, we can simply say that the mechanics for adventure games involve more narration, puzzles, and pure exploration.
On the other hand, action-adventure are faster paced than pure adventure games in a way that it has the same physical skills as action games but offer a storyline, numerous characters, an inventory system, dialogue, and other features of adventure games. It also includes both physical and conceptual challenges. Now that you already know what each genre's mechanics and definition is, we will now look back to when the genre first started and how it progressed throughout the years.
We'll explore the pure adventure genre first. So let's start from the very beginning. Colossal Cave Adventure, or simply known as Adventure. This was the first text-based adventure game, developed in 1976 by Will Crowther. The game has no graphics and is presented in text format only. The player moves around a cave system by entering simple two-word commands and reading text describing the result. The game relies almost entirely on the player's imagination. The player's job is to navigate the cave, fight enemies, and locate treasure. The game was based on Crowther's experience as a caver and wanted to create an adventure game that his children could enjoy with him when they came and visited. Inspired by the first text-based adventure game, Zorg was originally a single game written and distributed on mainframes and mini-computers in the 1970s by a quartet of MIT students who were part of the school's dynamic modeling group. It is recognized as one of the most memorable and influential text adventures of all time. I wish I was a dynamic model. Zork was ported over and expanded to a larger trilogy of games for a wide variety of home PCs, since the original system did not have enough memory to handle the entire game. After the release of Zork 2 and Zork 3, the first game was retroactively renamed Zork 1.
Adding to the timeline of how adventure and action-adventure games progress is the mystery house designed by Roberta and Ken Williams, who founded Online Systems, currently known as Sierra Entertainment. The game places players locked inside a mansion tasked with finding a way out, in which I say it is creatively designed for the first known adventure game to feature graphics even though the game is entirely text-based. The game was responsible for laying the foundations of the point-and-click graphic adventure game genre. In addition to its impact on Western adventure games, Mystery House was also partly responsible for introducing the adventure game genre to Japan, influencing visual novel writers such as Rika Suzuki. Another game designed and created by Sierra Entertainment is Wizard and the Princess, first released for the Apple II and Apple II Plus. It is the second title in Sierra's series of high-risk adventures after 1980's Mystery House. Plotline and setting both serve as a thematic prequel for Sierra's long-running King's Adventure franchise. Unlike Mystery House, Wizard and the Princess implemented rudimentary colored graphics regarded as the very first featured in a computer adventure game.
In 1983, King's Quest released. This was the real breadwinner for Sierra and Roberta Williams. King's Quest would go on to become an extremely long-running series. And this is also the first 3D animated adventure title. Enchanted Scepters is a graphical adventure game first released in 1984 by Silicon Beach Software, as well as one of the first games created for the Apple Macintosh platform. It is argued that it was the first to have a point-and-click interface as a control scheme, despite the fact the game did not use a mouse. Instead, the directional arrows were used to point to objects on the screen.
Myst is a puzzle adventure game designed by brothers Rand and Robin Miller. It was developed by their company Cyan, later known as Cyan Worlds, and was originally published by Brother Bond in 1993 for Apple Macintosh computers. Players explore a pre-rendered game world using a simplified point-and-click interface in order to solve puzzles and unravel the secrets of Myst, a deserted island connected to several other worlds via special linking books. Myst was one of the first games released on CD-ROM and heavily contributed to the format's early success in terms of interactive software. After its release for IBM-compatible PCs in 1994, Myst quickly became the best-selling PC game of all time until The Sims broke its record in 2002. The original game became the basis for a highly successful media franchise that spawned 4 direct sequels, several spin-off games, and 3 novels.
Blade Runner, a point-and-click adventure game released in 1997. Players control rookie Blade Runner Ray McCoy in a story which runs parallel to that of the film of the same name. It was a licensed game that doesn't try to replicate the film that inspired it. Instead, it presents a brand new plotline that runs alongside that of the film. Also noteworthy for being the first real-time 3D adventure game. Grim Fandango is a LucasArts adventure game released in 1998 that follows skeletal travel agent Manny Calavera's 4-year journey across the land of the dead in a film noir-inspired tale of love, betrayal, and corruption. This is where Tim Schafer really made his name. Inspired by film noir and Aztec mythology, Grim Fandango is still regarded as one of the funniest games ever created. On a side note, most of these games are still available for purchase on Steam or GOG for a relatively cheap price. Anyway, let's continue.
The Walking Dead, also known as The Walking Dead the Game or Telltale The Walking Dead, is an episodic adventure video game developed and published by Telltale Games. The game was responsible for bringing attention back to adventure games and widely popularized episodic adventure games.
Arguably one of the biggest franchises for adventure games in the modern day, Life is Strange is an episodic graphic adventure game published by Square Enix's European subsidiary created by Dontnod Entertainment. The series debuted with an eponymous first installment, which released episodically in 5 chapters across 2015. Now we'll focus on the notable games of the action-adventure genre, starting with Atari Superman, released in 1979 for the Atari 2600. It was one of the first single-player games for the system, and one of the earliest licensed video games released to be a tie-in with the 1978 film of the same name. The game was built using the prototype code for Juan Robinette's Adventure, and ended up being published before Adventure was even finished.
The game would soon be released in 1980 on the same console, simply titled as Adventure. It introduced new elements to console games, including a play area spanning multiple screens and enemies that continued to move when off-screen. It is often named as one of the industry's most influential games among the greatest video games of all time. Adventure was also considered the first action-adventure and console fantasy game.
The Legend of Zelda, one of Nintendo's most prominent and successful franchises. The Legend of Zelda released in 1986 for the Nintendo Entertainment System and Famicom. It is a high fantasy action-adventure created by Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka. It is said that it helped to establish a new subgenre of action-adventure. The Legend of Zelda series was the most prolific action-adventure game franchise through the 2000s and highly considered to be among the greatest video games of all time. Next game, Metal Gear. Metal Gear is an action-adventure video game created by Hideo Kojima and developed and published by Konami.
What the? Anyway, you were saying?
The game combined action-adventure exploration with stealth mechanics, laying the foundations for the stealth game subgenre, which would be later on popularized in 1998 with the release of Metal Gear Solid.
Great.
Alone in the Dark is a survival horror adventure video game designed by Frederick Raynal and developed and published by Infogrames for the PC in 1992. The game used 3D graphics, which would later be popularized by Resident Evil 1996 and Tomb Raider 1996. Speaking of Tomb Raider, coming up next is Lara Croft Tomb Raider between 2001 and 2008 is a media franchise that originated with an action-adventure video game series created by British gaming company Core Design. Gameplay generally focused on exploration of environments, solving puzzles, navigating hostile environments filled with traps, and fighting enemies. Additional media has been developed for the franchise in the form of film adaptations, comics, and novels. The series has generally met with critical acclaim and is noted as one of the pioneers of the action-adventure genre. Lara Croft has become one of the most recognizable video game protagonists, winning accolades and earning places on the Walk of Fame and Guinness World Records.
That ends the list for the history of action-adventure games. We know that there are more games like The Last of Us, the Assassin's Creed series, and so on, but we had to condense our list or else this video would have reached an hour or so.
Phew! I didn't know the history of adventure and action-adventure games would take that long. Are you guys still keeping up with us?
I think they are, Reese, since they wouldn't get to reach this point in our vlog.
Oh, you're right. Anyways, thanks for staying with us as we go through the other half of our vlog. I wouldn't take much of your time and will now go straight to the state of adventure games in these modern times. As aforementioned before, adventure games went through a decline in the early 2000s until 2010, but is now having a revival and is growing again from 2012 till now. Graphic adventure games struggle to find success in today's market, but they once topped sales charts year after year. The genre shot to the top of computer gaming in the latter half of the 1980s, then suffered an equally precipitous fall a decade later. As for action-adventure games, the genre is still very popular and progressing, especially linear action-adventure games due to the support of major AAA studios, publishers, and platforms supporting the genre.
Let's talk about issues. Well, before that, I apologize for the birds in the background, so let's pretend I'm outside while I discuss this portion. When it comes to issues and controversy about the adventure game, there isn't any specific controversy about the adventure genre itself. Instead, the controversy is mostly associated with its subgenres. Action-adventure is one of them. The most notable controversy that always surrounds action-adventure games is how violent the games are. Games such as God of War and Tomb Raider fall into these controversy. Going back to the adventure genre, or more specifically pure adventure, while there is no controversy surrounding the genre, it does have an identity issue. A lot of adventure games nowadays suffer from balancing the core fundamentals of what makes an adventure game, or worse, it lacks the fundamentals of what defines the genre. This is most apparent in the puzzle aspect of most adventure games. Some adventure game series strayed away from the genre itself, like Telltale's The Walking Dead. Their first entry had puzzles, but their later entries removed the feature and solely focused on decision making for the narrative. Speaking of narrative, this is also an issue of how some narratives in adventure games are uninspired or too simplistic. Adventure games used to be the pinnacle of video game genre, but now they're usually associated with being retro. While that's not a bad thing, it does not strive to its full potential. Adventure games used to be an innovative and progressive genre, but nowadays it follows a restricted template from the past, although I cannot say this for certain, as some developers are working hard to innovate the genre.
Adventure games have been around since the dawn of gaming, though the genre has evolved moving from text to fully fledged 3D experiences. It's unlikely to go away permanently. People seek a good story. Nothing beats a well-told story. And if adventure games are good at anything, it's sucking you into their fictional worlds and letting your imagination run wild. Despite the challenges that may arise, adventure games will continue to thrive, allowing players from all generations to experience its lore and gameplay.